All right, welcome. We are glad to be here today, talk to you about DNA, and answer any questions you have. We apologize for the late start, but a few technical difficulties. But we are here with lots of energy and hope that you'll learn a few things with us today. I'm Anna Swayne, and I work with AncestryDNA and the product and development and so forth. And
I'm Crista Cowan, and I am a professional genealogist. I've been doing genealogy for about 30 years, employed here at Ancestry.com for about the last 10 years, and I am officially, I think my title has something to do with the corporate genealogist, but I run a twice-a-week live stream called The Barefoot Genealogist, and we're kind of doing this in that same format that Anna and I are used to. Here's kind of the outline for our next 20 or 30 minutes together. We're just going to walk through the results of the DNA test and how it works. Now, we know some of you have not yet received your results. Some of you haven't even submitted your tests yet, but we're going to walk you through the results that you're going to get back from the Ancestry DNA test. Anna will review a little bit about some of the ethnicity results. We'll talk a little bit about cousin matching. And then Christy is in the room, even though she's not on camera. Most of you know her. She is watching the chat. So go ahead and log into the chat feature there on live stream. And for the last few minutes, she'll feed us any additional questions that you may have that haven't been answered during the course of the 20 minutes. So let's talk about ethnicity.
Okay.
We're probably going to need to do a swap to a screen share so that you can see what we're seeing here on our computer.
Perfect. All right, while that's going on, so when you log into your DNA results, as you can see, you log into Ancestry.com, you click on the DNA homepage, and then that gets you to this page here. Now, immediately, you'll see the person who took the test. So if that was you, great. It'll show up. This is Krista's results. But you can also get additional people tested, and that will also be on your list of on your account. So you can switch back and forth to anybody else that's also been tested. Krista's had her dad tested, her grandmother, and her mother tested. So that's fantastic. It's all listed for you there. Okay, so we're going to jump into ethnicity. Now, this is an ethnicity estimate. And so you took that saliva sample, sent it off to the lab analyzed it, and then they compared your DNA to 26 other regions that we have DNA on. And those regions are then compared, and then your estimate is provided in a list format, as you can see here with Krista's results. So she's 100% European.
Yes,
Was
I am.
that a surprise, Krista?
It kind of was, actually, yeah. Because my father's not.
Oh, that's right.
So we can actually compare, which is one of the benefits of having multiple family members tested, is you can compare those results, what you got from each of your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is just what's unique to you. If you had a sibling get tested, that will look fairly different. Like my sister, she got one whole ethnicity group different than I did. And that was a surprise to me. I said, hey, I got cheated. I'm the youngest. I got cheated. No, not really. But that was just my unique mix, and she had a different unique mix.
And I have something similar here. So these are my father's results. He's 76% British, which means he's more British than British people, right? But I only got 50% of that, and some of my British came from my mom. I got most of my Irish from my mom, and both of them probably contributed some of this European West. But you'll see here, my dad actually has 7% Scandinavian. That doesn't show up in me anywhere.
At all.
Right. Huh. So just the way that DNA is inherited, you get 50% of your DNA from each parent, but it's not 50% of everything they have. It is a random 50% of who they are. And so he didn't pass any of that Scandinavian on to me. But if I was to test one of my brothers or sisters, it might show up in one of them.
Exactly. It was interesting. My oldest sister just got tested, and because both of my parents have a fairly decent amount of Irish in them, it seems like they passed all of it down to her. And now she's super Irish. And so, and then she commented, and she's like, that's where I get my fiery temper. And, it's kind of fun to play the game of, who got what from whom. And it's really brought our family some good dinner conversations by getting everyone tested. So like Krista said, you get 50%. So if some of you are asking the question, well, why didn't this show up? Or why did I have so much of this? And it's because you get a random mix. It's just randomly inherited how it comes down. Your parents have 100% of their DNA, but can only pass down 50%. And we just don't know which 50 gets shuffled around. until you get tested and compare.
Which is why it's really a good idea to test the oldest living generation. And so I have one living grandparent. I've had her tested. I've had both of my parents tested just to give me a more complete picture, right, of what those ethnicities were. If you are the oldest living generation in your family, that's when it's a really good idea to start getting lots of siblings tested in that family to get a more complete picture, because you all got different percentages from your parents. Anything else about ethnicity you want to share?
So we're taking a look at your grandmother's results. So was there anything that stood out to you when you looked at your grandmother's results and comparing them to like your father's and then yours? Like even maybe the trace regions?
Well, yeah, so she has a few trace regions, but my father has trace regions in America, so he has some Native American and some Pacific Islander. Well, my grandmother, those are not any of her trace regions, which leads me to believe that probably came from my grandfather's side of the family. Now, my grandfather's deceased, so we can't test him, but that gives me a clue that it comes probably from that side of the family.
And that's excellent in trying to distinguish what part came from which family. Sometimes you can only test the people that are alive and that are available to be tested, and then you can infer what wasn't shared came from then the other side of the family.
Right.
Excellent. I was just going to briefly talk about trace regions. Will you click on trace regions? Your trace regions.
Yeah, my dad's got a few of them here.
Yeah, a few trace, which is kind of interesting because, you know, these trace regions, we call them trace regions because they're low confidence, but you have certain traces of them. And as we do more research and get more data on these populations, these results may change and vary based on, you know, how much DNA you have, in fact, from those regions.
Is it really a change, or is it just more of a refinement of the science? Could we see changes as we get more information?
Yeah, I mean, in Europe East might change into, you know, more refined groups.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess it's an adjustment. The percentage will stay. You'll always have 100% of something,
right?
But it'll vary based on the changes. And it's all based on more data that we have access to.
Okay.
More population data that we're doing research on, and then those who also participate in the Ancestry database who have strong, deep trees into certain regions.
Excellent. Okay, so 26 different regions that we test for currently, and you can actually, any one of you, if you click the little button that says down here at the bottom, show all regions, you can actually just see what all the regions are that we test for, not just the ones that show up in your personal results, just to get an idea for where in the world we're testing, or where in the world we have those reference samples from that we're testing your sample against.
And then if you want to dive deep into the site, I mean, we have a lot of resources on the site. If you click on Great Britain, it'll show you your range. So like, again, when we said this is an estimate, an ethnicity estimate, we do several runs through your DNA, and then we give you a range based on what your DNA compares to other regions to. Like in this Great Britain, she's anywhere from 9% to 72%. And that kind of seems a little bit interesting. But at the same time, you know, we have to do these multiple runs so that we have a good estimate versus just a one-time shot, and that's what we have on you.
Yeah, and then it looks like Christy's got a question here about ethnicity. Let's see what you have to ask.
I do. This is from Brian Smith, and he's saying you can only test those that are alive. He said, can't DNA tests be performed from any other DNA sample? What if we had a hair follicle and all that? And we want to maybe just explain why we do the saliva sample.
Okay. Great question,
So repeat
Brian.
the question in case people couldn't hear Christy.
So the question is, we can only test people who are alive. Can we test in other methods like a hair follicle, a brush? Some people have teeth, you know, et cetera. And the quick answer to that is it's extremely hard to extract DNA from other than saliva. And so as a company, there's other labs that do that. I mean, you can find other labs that will extract DNA from those other types of things. But for our system and our methods and the way our process is set up, is salivas are the easiest way that we can collect DNA from living people.
So living people only, but actually that's okay because of the way that cousin matching works. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, why you don't have to have deceased relatives tested, because living people can tell you a story about your ancestry anyway. There is just one further thing I want to point out here on the ethnicity detail that I love, and that's these maps. So you'll notice that when I click on these little ethnicity estimates here, the map changes. So it goes from showing me the 3 major regions that my grandmother has here to showing me details about Great Britain. And what this is telling me is that British DNA, or the DNA that has been labeled as the British ethnicity, is found in Great Britain, but that it can also be found as far away as Denmark and Germany and Italy, that people were a lot more migratory than we may have assumed them to be. And so British DNA is not isolated to this specific location. And we've got maps like that for every one of these regions where you can kind of see, mostly concentrated here, but Irish DNA could be found as far out as the southern coast of England. So I love the visual of that.
And then scroll down, Krista, so everyone can see that there's a lot more information here. So when you really want to dive in, you can look deeper into what we've done with the reference populations and then the population history about the region that your DNA is found.
Yep.
Just kind of interesting to give you that whole complete picture of as we try to rediscover our story.
Absolutely. And then there are more resources available. If you click on our help links here, we've got white papers that have been written by some of our scientists, lots of deep detail if people really want to dive into. I've read the white paper, all 50-some pages of it. 3 times. That's how many it took me to get it. Okay. Let's talk about cousin matching next. So the second portion of the Ancestry DNA test is what we call cousin matching. So your ethnicity, we take your sample and we run it against a reference population of people that we have in our database with known roots in that location. As a separate process, we then take your DNA and we compare it to the other 400,000 people who've taken the Ancestry DNA test. And we can tell, based on how much DNA you share with these people, how closely or distantly you're related to them. So we can take a look here. Actually, let's use my mom's results for this because she's got lots of really interesting things happening in her cousin matches. Basically, what we do is we say, based on how much DNA you share with these people, this is how closely or distantly you're related. Now, my mom's got lots of matches, so it takes just a minute to load the page there. You can see here that I'm listed as her child, which was good news for everybody involved. We also see here she has a first cousin match. Now, she knows this first cousin, but she didn't know this first cousin was this into Jennyology. So that was fun to reconnect with her. She has a second cousin match here that we can chat about in a minute. Bunch of third cousins. Okay, again, what we're looking at is how much DNA we share in common with these people determines how closely or how distantly we're related. So if you scroll down, then we get into fourth cousins, and she's got pages and pages of those. And then we get into the distant cousins, which we define here at Ancestry.com as 5th to 8th cousins. And correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, but 8th cousins is about the outset, right?
Yep.
So at an 8th cousin level, you share just enough DNA that we can tell that you're probably related to this person. But if we go any further out, the DNA becomes so minuscule and common that it's hard to tell. Okay, but think about what that can do for you for just a minute. Here's a little genealogy lesson for those of you who are non-genealogists. If you are a first cousin to someone, that means you have a common grandparent. Now, most of us know all 4 of our grandparents. So hopefully there's no surprises that show up in the first cousin range, although it happens. Second cousins share common great-grandparents. You have 8 of those. And not all of us know who all 8 of our great-grandparents are. So that's when you start looking at who does this person know about in their ancestry, and who do I know about in my ancestry, and where do those things overlap? And this is where the real power of Ancestry DNA comes in, which is Ancestry DNA is not just a DNA service. We're also connected as a family history service. And so if you take a test and start building your family tree, as an additional process here, we can compare your tree to the tree of everybody else who's taken the DNA test that's also attached to their results, and we can tell who your common ancestors are with these people that you already know now you share DNA with. So for an example, here's this third cousin match. We know we're third cousins because the DNA says so. We've both attached trees to our DNA results, and now we can see exactly how we're related. So Ancestry compares the 2 trees, and it can say, well, your father's mother's mother's father's father is the same person as, and it shows you the path to relationship. And Anna, I'm going to ask you a question because you explain this better than I do. Okay, so this came up as a third cousin match, and yet the actual relationship here is 4th cousin once removed. So how does that happen? Why does that happen?
So the actual DNA because you share so much, we've estimated it as a third cousin. But even as a third cousin, you could possibly be a fourth cousin, and that's why it's crucial to really try to build out our trees and have some kind of information, because that will help us identify, where that connection really is. And with this being a great example of how you are, in fact, connected. So this, you or your mother and this fourth cousin once removed, share enough DNA to be third cousins just because it's random. It's a random, inheritance as it comes down. And, it's typically not uncommon to see, one level off where you predict as a third cousin and really you're a fourth cousin, or you're predicted as a fourth cousin and paper tells you you're a third cousin. Right. And that's why we integrate the DNA so heavily in with the trees, and we really try to encourage people to build out a tree. Their 2 parents, their 4 grandparents, their 8 great-grandparents, so that we can try to help each other figure out where that common ancestor is. Because it could be on any one of your lines when you know you have a match.
Okay, yeah, and we see that a lot, right? So my mom got 50% of her father's DNA. He got 50% of his DNA from each of his parents, but he might not have passed on, he didn't pass on 25% from each of his parents. Mm-hmm. So my mom may have more DNA from her grandmother than she does from her grandfather, and so she may have stronger connections on this side of her family. And so there's some patterns we can start to look at there too. I know in my own research, I make note every time I find a match. I just use the system here to make a note about what the actual relationship is and who the common ancestors are, so that I can start looking for patterns among the matches. Does she have more matches from this side of the family than she does from the other side of the family? That's going to tell me something about the DNA that she has. It's really great.
And I bet it's interesting for you to compare your matches of your father with his mother.
Absolutely.
You know, and you can start to say, okay, this is from this side, this is from this side, and you start to play that game of making notes and kind of grouping it so you can understand who else you need to test.
Right. See, so because I can compare my dad's results and his mother's results, and any results they have in common are from her side of the family. Mm-hmm. Any results they don't have in common, I start looking to his father's side of the tree. Yeah. It's pretty great. Okay, let me just point out one other feature here, and then we'll see if Christy has any additional questions from you. So when you are looking at your matches, you'll notice that some of them have this little tree hint, if we can tell who in your tree has a match, but not everybody has that. So you'll notice here, if I look at some of my mother's new matches within just the last week or so, and with as many people as we have taking this test, there are new matches showing up every week. You'll see there is no little leaf here, which means she has 207 people in her tree, I have 62,000 people in my tree, and not a single one of those people are the same person. But what we do provide is some clues or some assistance. So we provide you a list of the surnames in their tree. If any of those surnames are the same as the names in your tree, we'll give you that information. We also provide you with maps and locations of birthplaces that you have in common in your tree. So it looks like if we look here at the United States, and I can say here are all the people born in Virginia in her tree, and here are all the people born in Virginia in my tree, and are any of them from the same little town in Virginia at the same time? And, chances are there's going to be some overlap there. Populations, as you go back 100, 200 years in rural locations, are really sparse. And so we can start to see some of the overlap in locations and start looking for location-based connections instead of just name-based locations. And that's especially useful for people who have name changes, for African Americans who are dealing with new surnames, oftentimes that they adopted after slavery, for immigrants who changed their names as they came over.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought up the location feature, because I think it's a resource that we don't take advantage of, especially when you have it all dotted out like this. You can even see, even though you don't have a shared specific location here, look how close these guys are. Yep. You have Tennessee and then over the border to Kentucky, though they're very close, they're in 2 separate states, but they were very close to each other.
Borders are just lines on maps.
Exactly, and I think, that can help us dive into where, if we have questions or we have, connections we're trying to make within a family, or sometimes people call it hit a brick wall, using locations to help us narrow that gap.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, well, Christy, what questions have you got for us?
So we have just a couple. One is looking at, the DNA test continues to expand as more large chunk of that region, but maybe it's split out into a couple of different regions, or will it actually be making 8% Irish and now 14% something else?
All right, so that's a good question about ethnicity, changing as we get more data. The question is, if I'm 22% Irish, will that change into more specific regions, or will I turn out to be 8% Irish? So based on, when we showed you the ethnicity results, based on what we have today, it was where we're giving you your estimate. Now, let's say we, dive in and we get all this new data on Irish DNA, and we can break out Ireland into more specific clans or groups, and then we reanalyze your DNA. You don't have to give another sample. We reanalyze your DNA. You may become more refined to Ireland and a certain clan, or maybe we find out that your Irish DNA, because it expands into Scotland, you're really part of that group, and so that might break out. So you might say you're 15% Irish and now 22% 7% something else. It's all based on data we have and that we have access to. And it's hard to say. Like, it really is hard to say based on your genetic code and the information we find. But what we can say today is we're 99% sure this is what you are today based on these reference groups that we have information on.
And the other one is, I'm going to expand on his statement, is just talking about multiple tests for multiple family members, and it could produce variances in locations to search, and just kind of like best practices. Like, I don't want to become a genealogist or a full-on family history historian, but I really want to know, kind of get a sense of where I come from. Say my mom says she's from Eastern Europe, but I show Irish. Where should I actually focus my search?
It's a good question. So the question was, if you don't want to become a full-on historian, I think that was the phrase you used, that where do we focus our search? So you get these ethnicity results, and your ethnicity says you're Irish or you're British or you're Western European. Where do you focus that research? Well, if your mother's results say something different, then which one do you focus on? The rule of thumb is the older the generation, the closer you are to those dead ancestors. Older generations don't like hearing that, but the idea is that they carry more of the DNA of your ancestors than you do. And so focusing on them and on their results, which is one of the reasons why we say test those oldest generations first, that's going to be more accurate. Now, I say that, I don't mean accurate, I mean more close to the origin, right? You are going to have DNA that now includes DNA from a whole other branch of your family, and that's fine. It's also going to be diluted, as it were, from the source. So if you've had a parent tested, focus more on their results, I guess, is the bottom line, than focusing on your own.
And can we this is not a question, but I think it'd be good for them to get an understanding of the type of records we will have available, that now that you've got your DNA results, maybe talk about them, about the censuses and immigration records, just kind of give a total landscape.
Just like a little Ancestry.com overview. So one of the things that you can do, since you've purchased the DNA test, you now have an Ancestry.com account. And with that account, one of the free things that you can do is start building your tree. And we would love to have you do that, and it will make your results more meaningful because of these connections that can be made. So you come in here, you go to this Family Trees tab, you start a new tree, you add yourself, your parents, your grandparents. If your parents or grandparents are still living, talk to them, get information that they remember about their parents and grandparents. And what's going to happen is, very quickly, once you enter that information, you're going to start to see what we call these little shaky leaves. So here's my tree, and I keep it. I don't attach a lot of records so that I always have leaves to share. So you see these little leaves. This is a great-grandfather. My dad had information about him, so I was able to fill some of that in. And then Ancestry.com provides me with access to hints or records that will tell me more information about him. Here he is on a 1900 census as a child with his parents. And so now, all of a sudden, I know the names of his parents and how old they were and when and where they were born. And a lot of that information is available. Some of that information is free, like the 1880 census, the 1940 census. Once you get serious about this is when you're going to need to upgrade to a subscription in order to access the more than 14 billion records that we have available on our website. And our records come from all over the world, so this is not just limited to U.S.-only ethnicities by any stretch. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Anything you want to add in conclusion here, Anna?
I would just say, DNA is an excellent tool to help us get started, especially when we don't know a whole lot about our family and how to get started. And so, get yourself tested, get others in your family tested, but don't get overwhelmed about starting a tree. And I know a lot of people I talk to who do DNA testing, and they're getting started into discovering more about their family. Crista, would there be something that you would recommend? Like, you pulled up your ancestor hints. Would something, for everybody out listening, like with those ancestor hints, what would you first look at? Census records?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, she's still living. She's 91 years old. I took a 1930 census to her. She was 8 years old on the census, and stories flowed out of that woman that I had never heard before. So
Excellent.
Even just looking at some of these DNA results or pulling up a record or two and sharing that with a parent or a grandparent, you're going to connect with your family history and your heritage in a way that you probably never even thought was possible before. So AncestryDNA, Ancestry.com, lots of really great resources. But the bottom line is what we're doing here is we're connecting with families. So hopefully you have that same experience as you embark on this DNA journey. Thank you. If you've got additional questions, oh, we do. We have one additional question that came in last minute.
Excellent. We love questions.
We thought we were wrapping up.
Sorry, one more, and this will be it. So is there a way of utilizing the mapping feature that they can be reviewed? Like it compares the birth sites to two different family trees, i.e. cousin matching, so that you can single out just your own tree and see those results?
So what the location map does, which is I think the question, is you're comparing one-to-one matches, and we're looking at birth locations from the people in your tree and birth locations from the people in their tree. So you can actually single them out based on color, right? So if I look here, the blue dots are my tree, and the orange dots are her tree, and then the green dots are the dots that we share, the locations we share in common. And those in common with locations are going to be a focus for your research. If I see that I've got a lot of in common stuff in North Carolina, well, then maybe I want to go learn a little bit more about North Carolina history and what North Carolina records are available on Ancestry.com. Okay, I think that's really it now. Thank you all for your time. If you have any additional questions, I'm sure Christy would not mind you contacting her. And if she needs any additional information, she'll forward those on to Anna and I. But thanks for letting us spend a few minutes with you in the middle of your work day. Hope you enjoy your Ancestry DNA journey. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.